Did you know that most of what you've seen, read, or heard about Billy the Kid is untrue? My name is Gail Cooper. I'm a medical doctor and forensic psychiatrist. My specialty is murder case consultation for the defense. For 20 years, I've used my expertise to uncover the real Billy the Kid. Researching over 40,000 pages of archival documents and books, I've written the revisionist history. It's shocking, it's liberating, and I've written books demolishing the hoaxes, hijacking the history. My talks will share with you what I've found. Cover-ups, misinformation, and fakery, to use Old West lingo, will bite the dust. This talk presents the June 5th, 2003 Billy the Kid case hoaxes front page New York Times announcement. The information is from my book, Cracking the Billy the Kid Case Hoax, The Strange Plot to Exhume Billy the Kid, Convict Sheriff Pat Garrett of Murder, and Become President of the United States. On June 5th, 2003, I got a fax from a friend. It changed my life. It was that day's announcement by New Mexico Governor Bill Richardson of his Billy the Kid case on the front page of the New York Times. So his hoax entered public consciousness at a stratospheric level. The article's title was, 122 Years Later, the Lawmen Are Still Chasing Billy the Kid. Its reporter, Michael Janofsky, parroted Richardson's press release without fact-checking. So he missed that he actually presented the Billy the Kid imposter hoax of Brushy Bill Roberts. He proclaimed that Richardson was starting a so-called modern science investigation to dig up graves of Billy and his mother for DNA to decide on pardoning Billy the Kid. Missed by Janofsky was that there's no connection between DNA and pardoning unless it backed the Brushy Bill hoax's claim that Brushy's murdered pal lay in Billy's Fort Sumner grave and he, as surviving Billy the Kid, deserved the pardon for his long and law-abiding life. Missed by Janofsky was that Richardson's quoted experts were just Brushy Bill believers and the hoax's participating lawmen. Missed by Janofsky was that a phone call to any legitimate historian would have informed him that Brushy had been born on August 26, 1879, making him under 2 at Billy Bonney's death. Missed by Janofsky was that there was no historical doubt that Pat Garrett killed Billy Bonney on July 14, 1881, and no investigation was needed. Missed by Janofsky was that the graves of Billy the Kid and his mother were just tourist markers without valid remains for DNA forensics. Missed by Janofsky was that he was just advertising a gruesome publicity stunt of desecrating graves. So, reporter Janofsky laid out for readers the Brushy Bill imposter hoax as reasonable history awaiting forensic validation. Janofsky wrote that Richardson sought, quote, evidence to a long-held alternative theory that Garrett shot someone other than the kid and led a conspiracy to cover up his crime. Fervent Brushy believer Janae Valdez, called an owner of a Billy the Kid museum in Canton, Texas, which was actually his museum for Brushy Bill, was quoted, "I'm absolutely convinced that Garrett killed someone else and that Brushy Bill was the kid." Richardson's hoaxing lawmen doing the fake investigation were named as Lincoln County Sheriff Tom Sullivan and his deputy Steve Cedarwall, who filed the murder case against Pat Garrett for killing the innocent victim with backup of a Texas law firm. That firm translated to Brushy backing hoax participant, attorney Bill Robbins III. Richardson's spokesman, Billy Sparks, was quoted that the state would assist by clearing any legal hurdles to gain access to the mother's body. That translated to certainty that Richardson's complicit district court judges would rubber stamp exhumation permits for the fake exhumations. Added was that if Brushy Bill didn't match the DNA of the mother, the corpse of Billy the Kid claimant, named John Miller, would be checked. Missed by Janowski was that Brushy had claimed a different mother, and John Miller was a pretender 10 years too old to be Billy. As to Richardson's pardoning, Janowski wrote that it had originally been promised to Billy by Governor Lew Wallace. Janowski parroted that all this would promote New Mexico tourism, while missing that the scam would hand over to Texas New Mexico's iconic Old West history and tourism. When I read the article, I assumed that Richardson had been tricked by Brushy believers. I assumed that someone just had to tell him the truth. On June 5, 2003, it was beyond my conception that a governor would destroy his state's famous history for a self-serving publicity stunt. So I began my descent into the sewer of New Mexico politics by being totally wrong. My first phone call was to a past New Mexico public official and history buff who knew Richardson. I asked him to call Richardson and explain the misunderstanding. My friend got back to me. There was no misunderstanding. Richardson was after publicity, not truth. Here's Michael Janowski's 122 years later, The Lawmen Are Still Chasing Billy the Kid, written from Lincoln, New Mexico. It's the 53-year-old Brushy Bill imposter hoax, updated for the 21st century. I added my commentary. On screen, we'll scroll my original facts. For his June 5, 2003 article, 122 years later, Lawmen Are Still Chasing Billy the Kid, reporter Michael Janowski excerpted wrote,
For more than 120 years, Pat Garrett has enjoyed legendary status in the American West. As sheriff here in Lincoln County in 1881, Garrett is credited with shooting to death a notorious outlaw known as Billy the Kid, a killing that made Garrett a hero. For years, a patch bearing his likeness has adorned uniforms worn by sheriff's deputies here. But now, modern science is about to interrupt Garrett's fame in a way that some say could expose him as a liar who covered up a murder to save his own skin and reputation.
Note that the bet was that the public would accept fake DNA matchings.
Officials in New Mexico and Texas are working out plans to exhume and conduct genetic tests on the bodies of a woman buried in New Mexico who was believed to be the kid's mother, and a Texas man known as Brushy Bill Roberts, who claimed to be the kid and died in 1950 at the age of 90. If test results suggest that the two were related, it would add new evidence to a long-held alternative theory that Garrett shot someone other than the kid and led a conspiracy to cover up his crime.
Note that the Brushy hoax is called an alternative theory. In Zero Research, Janowski missed that Brushy had denied that Billy's mother was his mother, so using her DNA to see if Brushy was her son made no sense. and he missed that Brushy was 20 years too young to be Billy. Janowski continued.
The debate over Billy the Kid is one of the longest running.
Note that there was no debate, just the Brushy imposter hoax plugged by charlatans and dupes.
Beyond renewing interest in the Kid's saga, the possibility that testing could enlarge Garrett's reputation or destroy it has even caught the fancy of Governor Bill Richardson of New Mexico, who has offered state aid for the investigation and a possible pardon that an earlier New Mexico governor had once promised the Kid for a murder he committed.
Note that the pardon hook hides that it's unrelated to DNA matching except for faking Brushy as Billy the Kid.
The problem is there's so much fairy tale with this story that it's hard to nail down the facts, said Steve Cedarwall, the mayor of Capitan, New Mexico, who is working with Lincoln County's current sheriff, Tom Sullivan. All we want is the truth, whatever it is. If the guy Garrett killed was Billy the Kid, that makes him a hero. If it wasn't, Garrett was a murderer.
Note that Cedarwall, deputized by Sullivan for the Garrett murder case, introduces the Brushy hoax by calling real history fairy tale. Janowski continued.
Historians generally agree that the Kid, born Henry McCarty and known at times as William H. Bonney, escaped after it became apparent that Governor Lew Wallace had reneged on a promise to pardon him in exchange for information about another killing in the county war. On April 28, 1881, the Kid managed to get his hands on a gun, kill the 2 deputies assigned to watch him, and leave the area on horseback. But then the stories diverge, providing fuel for 2 major theories of where, when, and how the Kid's life ended. The version embraced here and supported by numerous books and Garrett relatives is that the Kid made his way to a friend's ranch in Fort Sumner, about 100 miles northeast of Lincoln. The ranch owner, Pete Maxwell, was also a friend of Garrett and somehow got word to Garrett that the Kid was in the area. After arriving, Garrett posted 2 deputies at the door. As the Kid approached on the night of July 13th, it was July 14th, he spoke a few words in Spanish to the deputies who did not recognize him. But Garrett, waiting inside, knew the voice. When the Kid walked in, Garrett turned and shot him in the heart. William F. Garrett of Alamogordo, New Mexico, who is Garrett's grandnephew, said years of research, including conversations with his cousin Jarvis, the last of Garrett's 8 children, convinced him there is no question about it that his great-uncle killed Billy the Kid at Maxwell's. Note that Jarvis Garrett was in Brushy's 1950 pardon hearing, declaring him an imposter. But just as the story of Garrett as hero has flourished over the years, so have others, including the tale of Brushy Bill of Hyco, Texas. His trip to New Mexico in 1950 to seek the pardon he said he was denied nearly 70 years before gave new life to an alternative possibility that Garrett had not killed the Kid at all, but a drifter friend of the Kid's named Billy Barlow. Note that Janowski omitted that the Mabry pardon hearing declared Brushy an imposter. This story holds that Garrett and the Kid may have been in cahoots for some reason, and that Garrett had stashed a gun in the outhouse at the jail that the Kid used to kill the deputies and escape. If only part of that is true, It would strongly suggest that Garrett killed the wrong man.
Note that, as will be seen in later talks, this Garrett as deputy murder accomplice is the Billy the Kid case's addition to Brushy's hoax. Janowski continued.
Janae P. Valdez, curator of the Billy the Kid Museum in Canton, Texas, said he had no doubt that Garrett killed someone else and that Brushy Bill was the kid.
Note that Janowski missed that Valdez's museum was for Brushy Bill. Janowski continued.
As longtime friends, Mr. Cedarwall and Sheriff Sullivan decided they wanted to settle the matter once and for all, but could do so only through scientific analysis. So in April, they opened the first ever investigation into the murders of the two deputies shot in the kid's escape, James W. Bell and Robert Ollinger, to examine what happened at the jail and Maxwell's ranch.
Note that Janowski missed that this was unrelated to whether Billy was Garrett's victim. They just fired a revolver in the courthouse to see if it could be heard in the town. It was. It's unclear who invented the murder case against Garrett to get law enforcement's option of doing exhumations. Cedarwall and Sullivan merely tacked on their own little publicity stunt to this when joining the Billy the Kid case hoax. They later rewrote this stunt as a fake sub-investigation claiming Garrett was Billy's jailbreak accomplice, then his escape accomplice in murdering the innocent victim in Fort Sumner. Later, Cedarwall and Sullivan made up that they found Bell's blood in a courthouse location differing from Garrett's version of the killing, proving he was a liar. Janowski continued.
As Mr. Cedarwall said, there's no statute of limitations on murder.
Note that this is untrue. The hoax pretended that Garrett's killing of the innocent victim was a cold case murder. First of all, there wasn't a murder, since the coroner's jury for Billy the Kid declared his killing justifiable homicide. Secondly, New Mexico had a statute of limitations for murder in Garrett's day, ending in 1891 for the 1881 killing. Janowski continued.
The goal now, Cedarwall said, is to compare genetic evidence of Catherine Antrim, believed to be the kid's mother and is buried in Silver City, New Mexico, and of Brushy Bill, who lived out his life in Texas. A Dallas firm,
it was a Houston firm with hoax participant attorney Bill Robbins III,
has agreed to help, and a spokesman for Governor Richardson said the state would assist by clearing legal hurdles to gain access to the mother's body.
Note that Janowski missed that Catherine's grave is just a tourist marker, that Brushy denied she was his mother. Janowski continued.
The kid was buried at Fort Sumner, New Mexico, although the whereabouts of the grave are uncertain. He has no known living relatives.
Note that Janowski missed that the uncertain gravesite eliminated it for valid DNA. Janowski continued.
Mr. Valdez said he had already secured permission to exhume the body of Brushy Bill, who was buried in Hamilton, Texas.
Note that Valdez had no permission. Janowski continued.
And even if tests disqualify Brushy Bill as Billy the Kid, other kids have emerged, including a man named John Miller, who died in 1937 and is buried in Prescott, Arizona. Mr. Cedarwall said that efforts would be made to exhume his body as well.
Note, Billy the Kid case opportunism. Its real cause was profiteering. And John Miller was a pretender 10 years too old to be Billy the Kid. Janowski continued.
The investigators conceded that much is riding on their quest. Sheriff Sullivan, a tall, strapping man who carries a turquoise-handled .357 Magnum on his right hip, said he revered Garrett for gunning down the kid. Now the legend is threatened.
Note that the only threateners are the hoaxers, including Sullivan.
I just want to get to the bottom of it, the sheriff said. My integrity's at stake. So's what we believe in and even New Mexico history. If Garrett shot someone other than the kid, that makes him a murderer, and he covered it up. He wouldn't be such a role model then.
So this is how one incompetent reporter blasted fake news of the Billy the Kid case hoax into the world. And across the Atlantic Ocean, the article landed the Brushy hoax a new dupe, inspired to make a movie about the Billy the Kid case's quest. Her successful and destructive creation is exposed in a later talk. The next talk presents Governor Bill Richardson's Billy the Kid case hoaxes press release.